Welcome to Local Author Day 2024. I'm Shannon Emmons. I'm a programs coordinator here at Garland County Library, and I'm so excited to be with you all today. Some of you are familiar faces from last year, and some of you are new friends in this meeting. I guess I want to dive right in. Let's see. I want to introduce our guest speaker, our keynote speaker for the day, Ms. Karen Bryan. She is the Executive Director of Arkansas Learning Through the Arts and the co-author of Blackness in Opera, which is a look at how race and Blackness play out in opera, published by University of Illinois Press. If you will, please welcome her to the stage.
Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate being here today and sharing this with you. I feel a little bit like a fraud because I don't have a book that's coming out right now. And if I don't get to writing pretty soon, it may never get out. But, you know, and the one book that I do have that I co-edited was a little bit of time ago. So we're kind of in between. But she asked me to do this because of the research that I do. And so I'm always open to sharing what has become basically an obsession for me. And that is essentially Black performance in opera. Now, to tell you a bit about myself, I'm a musicologist, ultimately. And that's what all my training was in. And many years ago, my area of focus was Italian opera, just like every other musicologist that was interested in opera. You went to Italy, you looked up all of these people. I worked on this guy that I think I'm the only person in this country who's ever heard of this composer, which is a little bit of a problem. But when I finished all of that or got to a certain point, it was pretty clear I was going to have to spend lots of time in Italy. I was going to have to spend lots of time negotiating with Italian librarians, and you guys are wonderful because Italian negotiations with Italian librarians never go well, especially if you're American. They never go well. And there's a tremendous pursuit of grant funding that was going to happen. Plus, I was going to have to be away from home a lot. Well, at about the same time, I realized that one of the things I'm good at and one of the things I'm interested in is academic administration. Yeah, I'm one of those. I'm the bean counter. I went over to the dark side and I became an administrator. But that meant that I had 12-month contracts, not a 9-month contract. It meant I couldn't spend all of those months in Italy. It meant that I needed to find something closer to home. So I started looking at what that might look like, what it might be. And I was really floundering a little bit because I didn't really want to focus on 20th century, American music because a lot of it just didn't appeal to me. I was buying into the concept at the time that you had to be mainstream art music because looking at popular music, looking at women's music, looking at jazz and researching in those, the Academy was kind of like, well, when are you going to get serious? And so I was trying to find something. Well, my husband, who is a partner in crime in all of this, bought me a calendar one year for Christmas from the Library of Congress. And this calendar had everything in it from the Performing Arts Library, which is a wealth of things, not only books, scores, manuscripts, but artifacts as well. So there were lots of things in there that could really pique your imagination. And I was sitting in my office one day doing the really boring work of doing some kind of schedule for the next semester. And a photo on the calendar really kind of caught my attention. It was a cast photo of an opera production. And there were two things about it that were a little different. One, it said that it was a performance of an opera called Wanga by a man named Clarence Cameron White, who I had never heard of, which I'm not, looking back now, I'm not surprised. And the cast was all Black. And in the late 1990s, to see a picture from the 1950s of a Black opera cast wasn't that usual. So I thought, okay, let me look at this. And I started looking up Clarence Cameron White. I'd never heard of him. I knew nothing about him. I know more about him now than you really want to know. But in looking up, I kept seeing references to these performances of Wonka, which is great. But in doing so, they always referenced the production that happened in 1956 by the National Negro Opera Company, led by Mary Cardwell Dawson. Okay. And just as a disclaimer, there will be terms that I use during the course of this talk that I'm using in the historical, or if they were part of a title or part of a particular reference or something, so please be aware of that. But anyway, this particular opera company, I was looking at it going, okay, I keep running into this, I give up, I'm gonna look it up. Fine. I looked at National Negro Opera Company. I looked at Mary Cardwell Dawson. I found one, by that time, Wikipedia article that was really bad. Badly written, badly resourced, everything. But it was there. It was at least there. So I was going to Washington on a trip. My husband was going for business. I thought, okay, I'll tag along. Obviously, they have something at the Library of Congress. And I called and I said, do you have stuff there? Do you have a collection? Oh, yeah, we're fine. And there's a finding aid. I said, okay. Is it in the warehouse or is it out where I can get to it? He's like, oh, no, you can get to it. Just call it up. Fine. I go by expecting a couple of files or something like that. 67 boxes.
Wow.
Something like 25 linear feet on the shelf. I had my work cut out for me. Turns out, here's this woman who, in high heels, was about 5 feet tall. And she always wore high heels because to get to 5 feet tall. And she had started an opera company. Now, when we think of opera in the early 20th century, we think of it as a white institution. It was a very elevated, very elitist, and I will use that term advisedly, production. It was that way, not only, I mean, it was that way for American singers in general. Most of the singers in the early part of the 20th century in this country who performed opera came from Europe. If you were not European, or at least did not have European training, you really didn't know what you were talking about. That applied to singers, that applied to composers, that applied to pianists, that applied to everybody. So that was one of the problems. But the other problem was that because of their race, they were not included in any of the companies. There were various excuses. They didn't have sufficient training. Their voices were not up to taking on the rigors of operatic performance. And the usual question, which was, well, don't you really want to concentrate on spirituals or jazz? I had a student ask that 5 years ago. So this is nothing new. But it turns out that wasn't exactly the case. No, they didn't perform in the white companies. Those were closed. The Met, all of the different companies in New York, Philly, Chicago, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, LA, wherever, you name it, pretty much did not hire Black singers. Occasionally, an impresario would hire 1 or 2 to sing Aida, because after all, they've considered that appropriate. And it would be a one-off, and it was almost done as kind of a variety type of thing or a novelty type of thing. So, turns out, Black singers and Black impresarios were not sitting around waiting for the white dominant culture to figure out that they were there and to give them a break. They were making their own infrastructure, if you will, their own network of opera companies, of performances, of training. They were training through some of the HBCUs. They were training through some of the conservatories that would accept Black students, such as Oberlin, New England, Manhattan, Juilliard occasionally, and things like that. And they were training in Europe and then coming back to this country. They were performing in Europe and then coming back to this country. And so when I started looking into all of this, it was astounding. I mean, those of us who work on it have employed a variety of techniques to find all of this stuff. I've been through more newspaper articles than you can imagine in the course of the last 20 years. And you basically have to find it that way. Sometimes it would be covered in the white press, but most likely it was going to be in the African American papers. And you would find it in archives. You would find it in people's personal collections and things like that. So there's tons of stuff. Well, when I started working on Mary, Madam Mary Cardell Dawson, because she always wanted to be Madam Mary Cardell Dawson, I found out that all of this performance activity had actually started in the 19th century. You had traveling opera troupes, they would call them, that performed everything from vaudeville kind of acts to dramatic recitations to opera scenes. Most of them were run by women. Most of the Black troupes were run by women, which is a phenomenal idea and concept in itself. Once you get to about 1900, you start seeing opera companies that are a little more residential, if you will, a little more staying put, particularly in New York. But there were opera companies in New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Detroit. I think there was one in Nashville. I think there was one in Baltimore. There was one in Red Banks, New Jersey. No idea. I haven't found a lot about them. But I mean, so you can see it wasn't inconsequential. There was a fairly substantive tradition here. Well, what Mary did, she went to the New England Conservatory of Music. She was accepted in at about the age of 25, 26. She graduated at 30. One of her students made the mistake of saying, "Oh, wow, at 30? That's old." They didn't say that again. But she lived in Pittsburgh. She was born in North Carolina. Her family moved as part of the migration around the turn of the century to Pittsburgh. Her father and her uncle went to work in the brickyards. They did not go to the steel mills. They went to the brickyards. And that was actually pretty good. They got a much better job there than they would have in the steel mills. And they lived up the hill in Homestead, what is now Munhall. And Mary was active in church. She was in the church choir. She taught piano. She studied piano, organ, voice, anything else she could. She got this degree. The degree was in music ed, or in teaching, as they called it, music teaching. Because after all, she would need a career. They did not want her to have a performance degree because after all, there was nothing she could do with that. So she got this. She went to back home to Pittsburgh and established a music school. She was patterning it after some of the independent music schools that had been established in the Northeast. She hired teachers from the area that were very well known and very good. They were kind of like a who's who of the teachers in the area. They taught piano, voice, organ, violin, all of the string instruments, all of the wind instruments, theory, music history, dictation, rhetoric, and they would do dramatic recitations and things like that. And then they would also do community plays, operetta style performances. That turns out was kind of a practice for the opera company. She also formed a choir. Again, this was one of her major passions. This choir became known basically through the region and into the Northeast. It won all kinds of performances, all kinds of competitions. They performed at the 1939 World's Fair in New York and things like that. And it became the basis of her opera company, which she formed in 1941 in August. She had 5 months before D-Day.
Wow.
I mean, not D-Day, I'm sorry, before Pearl Harbor. Got the other end of the war. Anyway, she was president of an organization called the National Association of Negro Musicians. And she said, guys, you've been doing performance with instrumentalists. You've been doing choirs. You've been doing singers. We're going to do opera. At which point they went, oh, Lord, do you know how much opera costs? Yes, I do. We're going to do an opera. And they ended the conference in Pittsburgh that year with Aida. Wow. Totally sold out, did really well, cost the organization a fortune. They decided never to do an opera again. And I think they probably still haven't at this point. But then she took it on the road. And the genius of this was that she wasn't an isolated local company. She drew singers from all of these cities that had companies and that had performance traditions. And she brought them to Pittsburgh and to Chicago and to Washington and to New York. And she envisioned a national approach to this art form and to this type of performance. She would have as many as 300 people involved. Over the course of 20 years, till the time she died in 1962, more than 1,800 individuals took part in that company at some point or another. Now, what was really important, beyond the fact that she was actually doing this and pulling all of these people together, was what she accomplished. One, she was an advocate. She would argue with anyone. She would lobby anyone, including Eleanor Roosevelt, including John F. Kennedy, including Richard Nixon, including anyone who she thought could get her what she needed for her company. She refused to perform or have her company perform in a venue that did not allow integrated seating. Now, it turns out that wasn't that unusual. A lot of the Black performers did that. But it was unusual to find somewhere that would allow that. So they performed in places as wide-ranging as Madison Square Garden. But one of the caveats was they had to allow concession sales up and down the aisles during the performance. I've never been to a performance of an opera with popcorn sales and soft drink sales in the aisles, but maybe it would help attendance. Who knows? They performed at a place called the Watergate Barge in Washington. I don't know how many of you might be familiar with that. At the steps of the Lincoln, or just across from the steps from the Lincoln Memorial, there are some steps that lead down to the Potomac that are now just concrete steps and basically an amphitheater type area. At the foot of those steps was an anchored barge, and it was a performance stage. It's where the Washington National Symphony or the National Symphony did their summer concerts. It's where they had all kinds of concerts, plays, and things like that. Imagine performing opera on something that does this and this. I'd have been seasick in a heartbeat. But anyway, because boat traffic didn't stop during the performances, so you can only imagine. But she had it sold out. They would have as many as 12 to 15,000 people at one of those performances. Of course, if it rained, which it always rained in July in Washington, you could get rained out and it could cause financial problems. One of the most important places they performed was this thing about Wanga. It was done at the Metropolitan Opera House. It was the first time an outside company, and especially a Black company, had been allowed to perform on that stage. But it wasn't without restrictions. They could not do dramatic. They couldn't do a dramatic thing. It had to be a concert version. They were not supposed to have costumes. They were not supposed to have an orchestra. They couldn't use the box office. They couldn't use the tech crew. They couldn't use the dressing rooms. This is 1956. So all those restrictions were there. So all her volunteers ran their own box office, ran their own tech crews, ran all of the backstage. They rigged up dressing rooms. She had her singers in costume, and there was as much dramatic motion as she thought she could get away with. And she went right up to the edge and was just hanging there. It was that close to being a full dramatic performance. But she did it. She didn't take no from anyone. So that's the kind of thing she did. She also lobbied Clark Griffiths. Anybody heard of Clark Griffiths Stadium in Washington that was the home of the Senators? Clark Griffiths was the owner of the stadium. He was one of the first baseball owners that hired Cuban players, for instance, and integrated baseball that way. And he said, sure, use the stadium for free. And so they performed festivals there every year. She insisted that her singers be included in the American Guild of Musical Artists, which was the union that represented opera artists. That was great. It was also bad, because then the union would come along and say, well, you missed this payment, or you missed this, or you didn't have enough money for that, you're on the unfair list. The unfair list meant they could not produce an opera until they had met all financial obligations. And she did every time. Her singers would do benefit concerts, they would do galas, they would do a series of festivals, they would do anything they could to raise money. She moved in circles that included people very important to the civil rights movement. Mary McLeod Bethune, Dorothy Height, Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King. One of her choreographers said, "Oh yeah, I used to have these salons all the time, and Martin and Coretta would come by, and she'd give Martin pointers on how to speak effectively in public." But there was that kind of give and take. They had that kind of relationship. Some of the other things that she did, in addition to getting all of these people on stage, she insisted that the orchestras that supported them include Black performers. That was highly unusual, and the American Federation of Musicians wasn't happy. But it happened. She didn't take no for an answer very often. She mentored singers. She gave them a place to stay when they couldn't find somewhere to stay, which, if you were in Pittsburgh, that was pretty often. The only place that they had to stay in Pittsburgh was the house where she had her opera company, because the top floor was her opera company and school until they moved to Washington in 1942. The middle floor was a boarding house, if you will, or a safe housing, and the lower floor was a speakeasy. You got everything. It was owned by by a man named Woody Harris, who ran numbers for the community in Pittsburgh, but he was also very altruistic. He poured money into the Black community and supported things like this and supported endeavors like this. She was an activist for social justice, and she didn't care who she took on. At one of the hearings where they were talking about putting her on the unfair list for the union, she was in front of the board of directors, and it wasn't going well. I've read the minutes, and it was very contentious. But finally, this one member of the board, who happened to be an incredibly well-known tenor, and I can never put this in this book because his family would sue me, but he looked over and he said, "Well, I don't know why we're even discussing this. Everyone knows Negroes can't sing grand opera." She said, "Would you say that again?" He did, and she slapped him. And she was arrested. Another time she was in a department store and tried on a hat. And because she had tried on the hat, she was told she had to buy it. I remember incidents like that from childhood, hearing about things like that. She got mad. She got mad a lot. She tried on every hat in the department and got arrested. She tried to sit at a lunch counter in Washington, D.C., and they refused service. So she went back in the kitchen where she knew some of the workers and began to break up the crockery and got arrested. Now, it's funny. I mean, we laugh, and it's kind of a nervous laughter. She could have died at that point. She could have disappeared into that system and never been seen again. And the amount of intestinal fortitude it took for her to stand up and say, "You're not doing this to me, and you're not doing that to us," is unbelievable. And it's one of the things that I've come to one of the things I admire most. I'm not sure I would be that brave. But most of the arrest records were expunged. The first time, the one where she slapped the guy and was arrested, she was bailed out by Billy Rose, Broadway producer director. One of her former singers was in one of his productions and went to him and said, "Her husband's in Washington, we're in New York. She doesn't have the money to get bailed out. This could get bad." And Billy marched down there and bailed her out. So they didn't, at that point, there was too much attention by too many prominent people. They didn't dare do anything. But a number of important people came through that company, not necessarily started there or ended there. But for instance, Lillian Avanti, who had trained in this country but could not perform. So she went to Europe. She became the first Black female to perform in a number of opera houses in Europe. When she came back to Washington, she couldn't get a job. Her first time on stage was with this company at the age of about 50, which is getting to be a little past prime for especially a soprano, a coloratura soprano, who has a really light, high voice. A woman named La Julia Ray, who had been on the vaudeville circuit, who had performed opera in informal situations, who had done all kinds of things. This was her first opportunity to perform opera in a formal setting. A man performed with the company in the early 50s that you'll kind of recognize. His name's Robert McFerrin Sr. He's better known now as Bobby McFerrin's father. But he was the first Black male to get a contract with the Metropolitan Opera. He made his debut 3 weeks after Marian Anderson did. But the problem was he had also won the Metropolitan Auditions of the Year, which was kind of the Met auditions of that day. And usually they stayed in the studio training for 6 months before their debut. They kept him in that studio for 18 months before they allowed him on stage. And he had already performed with New York City Opera. He had performed basically all over the country, but they said he wasn't ready for real opera. So, but he basically proved them wrong. What I've gotten interested in is there are a lot of singers from this area, from Hot Springs, from Little Rock, that went on to be known on these stages. A woman named Minto Cato was born in Little Rock. She left Little Rock, went to Chicago first, then went to New York. She ended up being in Green Pastures. She ended up being in Porgy and Bess. She did some stuff with Four Saints in 3 acts, a number of things like this, and she sang with this company. There's a woman from Hot Springs, and if anybody has information on her, please contact me. Shannon knows how to get in touch with me. Her name is Katie Florence Smith Phipps. You know her?
I don't know her, but the last name is significant.
Yes, her daughter was the first PhD in psychology or something like that from Columbia. And her husband was a dentist.
Well, it also sounds like she's a part of that family. Dr. Mamie Phipps, who was married to Dr. Clark.
That's her daughter. That's her daughter.
So there is at the Garland County Historical Society, and Jean Langsfield is really doing an in-depth study on that particular family.
Okay, good.
So,
because I've got somebody who's interested in getting that information.
Okay.
She was in the first graduating class of the Washington Conservatory of Music in Washington, D.C. And so there is that connection.
Okay.
Barbara Hendricks, a very well-known African-American opera singer who is still living expat in Switzerland, was from, I think, Stevens, Arkansas. William Warfield was born near Little Rock. The composers Florence Price and William Grant still grew up in Little Rock. So, I mean, this is an area that is rich in this history. And that's one of the things that's beginning to pull me since I'm here now. But anyway, and I promise I'll hush soon. But over the 20 years, what struck me is I've been giving papers. I wrote the book Blackness in Opera, which we took some things, we had proposed a conference paper or panel, and everybody was turned down except me because mine was the most conservative. We got angry. By the time we left the conference, we had 13 contributors and 3 publishers interested. And we had people talking about how composers addressed the issue of race, how topics dealing with race, like the Haitian revolution in Haiti and things like that, how performers dealt with it. George Shirley was a contributor, and things on that order. That kind of opened the floodgates. We had been doing all of this in conferences. We had been doing it for each other. But this book, when it came out in 2012, kind of made it okay for everybody to start talking about it. And we started having younger scholars begin to be interested and begin to pull things together for it and begin to do projects and everything. And universities were no longer telling us it was insignificant research, that type of thing. And we thought, okay, we've made it. But then we started noticing, when we say we're working on this, and people go, oh, you're working on Marian Anderson? Okay, no, let's back up a little bit. There were other people involved. And we realized we hadn't been doing our job very well. So a lot of us have gone public facing, as we call it, or public musicology. So for instance, I work with a group called the Denise Graves Foundation. Denise is an opera singer. She's been with the Met for many years. She was the Carmen in the 90s and early 2000s. And after the pandemic, she established this foundation to work with students who are coming through undergraduate and graduate training, either at an HBCU or at a predominantly white conservatory. We've set up a consortium of these schools. And we have cohorts of these students that go through every year. They get all kinds of master classes, coachings, intensives about how to deal with management or how to deal with auditions or how to deal with X, Y, or Z, all of those intangibles that they need to know as they go into the professional world. The other component that I'm in charge of is called Hidden Voices. And we try to bring these stories of these people who have been totally left out of the narrative back into the narrative. So we, going back to my roots with a calendar, we do a calendar every year that features 12 artists that you probably would not know otherwise. We give resources about them. We give links to recordings or videos when they're available. We do then put that onto our website so it's there in perpetuity. We do things on our Instagram and Facebook posts highlighting people or making note of important dates. We have established, or we developed an exhibit on Mary Carville Dawson that is about 12 panels long. And I had to write every one of them, but it was fun. And we have all kinds of photos that we got from the Library of Congress and so forth. And it pretty much goes along with a play called The Passion of Mary Carville Dawson that talks about a couple of little spotlighted times that were very challenging for her. So that has been at the Kennedy Center, that has been at Opera Carolina in Charlotte. It is currently at Pittsburgh Opera because they're doing the play. We have about 3 others that are coming up in the next 12 months where that exhibit is out, and we're working to expand that exhibit and have it incorporate other companies and other artists, and just seeing the reach that came from the 30s and 40s and 50s and what that does now and what that means now. The other thing that I do that Shannon mentioned is that I'm executive director of Arkansas Learning Through the Arts. And if you had told me that I would be doing a nonprofit that worked with K through 12, I would have gone, really? Okay. But in some ways, it's the same thing. We put professional artists who are also educators into classrooms. They work with students in ways that are standards driven. So they work with literacy standards, they work with content area standards. But their entire thing is to make it possible for these students to, one, be exposed to different art forms and different media, if you will, and to get them to be able to express themselves, to be able to share what they're thinking or to be creative, all in a safe space so that they don't feel constrained in any way. And we're finding that attendance goes up, we're finding that their literacy rates are improved, and we find that they have absolutely no problems expressing themselves afterwards. We have one student that the teacher calls and said, "What did you do? You know, this student will not hush." Well, great, you know, he's expressing himself. He said he had not uttered a word prior to that workshop all year long. And now he won't hush. So, you know, that's great. And that's the kind of thing we want. And so that's the other thing. That's the other public facing thing that I'm doing at this point. So if you want more information on that or on the Denise Graves, we both have websites. What we're also finding is that we have, if you're on Facebook, there are a number of sites, and I'm going to read these because I'll forget them. Otherwise, I'll leave somebody out, and they're all really particularly good, that have information. We're finding that social media is a really good way to get some of this out in short bursts of information that people can read. We can give resources. If they want to go somewhere else and find it, they can. Afrocentric music researchers, not necessarily just opera, but goes into a lot of different areas. William Dean's Opera Folk, not necessarily just African American, but it does cover a lot of things that are happening in the opera world, and a high percentage is devoted to singers of color. The Art of the Negro Spiritual, not opera, although sometimes they stray into opera, but again, a good resource for information on a lot of the performers. The African American Art Song Alliance, which talks a lot about composers and classical art music, and then Black Singers of Concert and Operatic Literature, which does have lots and lots of information if you're interested in pursuing that. So that's basically what I'm doing. Like I said, not probably the author talk you expected to hear, although I'll get the book out eventually, I swear. Either that or I'll probably be disowned at home. But, you know, this is an important topic, and it's one that we're really enthusiastic and passionate about getting out there. We have lots of junior scholars now who are beginning to take up this thing, and we're making it kind of a project. We go out and do these papers on all of this stuff that we're finding and go, we're not going to work on this. We're not going to live long enough. Guys, take it and run, you know, and they're doing it. And so that's part of what we're doing as well. We have people who are doing timelines so that you can see comparative things happening. We have people who are doing mapping projects so you can see where these singers and these performers came from and what impact they have across the country. And all of that, and we're doing things like this so that we have this public-facing aspect now, rather than just talking to each other all the time and congratulating each other all the time. So anyway, but thank you for letting me come in today. Thank you for letting me talk about all this. And do you have time for questions? Do you want?
Tell us about your new book.
The new book is on Mary Carville Dawson and the National Negro Opera Company. And basically what I'm looking at is her impact, what she accomplished, some of the things, like I said, with the union, the national networking, that type of thing, the repertory that she chose, because she was one of the few that would deal with works by Black composers. Most of the Black composers formed their own opera companies so that they could get them done, but she would actually do some of it. Her activist work, and then the impact, who she taught, who her performers taught, because a lot of them went into colleges, a lot of them went into private studios and things like that.
And what's your deadline on your new book?
About 10 years ago. It depends on who you're talking to. My deadline is I'm getting there. My husband's deadline is, are you finished yet? Come on. So I would love to get it done in the next few months. I've got a publisher who's waiting for it, the same one that did the other one. She's been waiting for it for a while, but she's just told me, yeah, we're ready for you. Get it to us. So.
Are you familiar with the book, The Black Maestro by Joe Draper?
No, I am not.
It does for horse racing what your book does for opera.
Interesting.
It has some Arkansas roots,
Mm-hmm.
and he raced here and in the Kentucky Derby.
Interesting. Now, I think I have heard that name, but I'm not familiar with the book, so I'll have to look that up. Thank you.
I have a quick one.
Yeah.
May I email you and get the sites that you listed?
Yes.
And then put them on our live stream comments and send them to our authors?
Sure.
Fantastic.
Because that will, because there are a number of things, if anybody's interested in pursuing that, those are really good things. You get a really quick snippet. You don't have to spend hours and hours and hours drudging through everything. Well, again, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you again for coming, Karen. We really appreciated hearing from you. I'm sure you can tell now why I wanted to invite her to come and speak for us. Her books are a great example of what happens when you get obsessed with a topic and decide to dive into the research, which I know several of the authors here have also done. And also just a great example of what getting angry can actually do for you. So, let's see. I want to give a couple of quick announcements. First of all, if you hear from an author today and would like to meet them, our meet and greet sessions are going to be at 1 and at 2:15. And I'm just going to read those groups out loud for our virtual viewers so they'll know. So group A is going to include Jerry Bingham, Mike Blythe, Christian Bordelon, Stephen Campbell, Ty Coggin, Cynthia DeAlba, Michael Dryhurst, Jane Elsey, Jay Southern Hicks, Kathy Hudson, Sharon Keithley, Deborah Custer, Kathy Melvin, Ashley Nix Lindsley, Rose Pogue, Katrina Robertson, William Sales, and Janet Wesley. So if you'd like to see them, please come at 1 o'clock. And then our second group is going to include Cheryl Batts, Jerry Butler, Dustin Campbell, Jenny Carlisle, Shirley Chancellor, Layla Gatlin, Darlene Howell, Akaya Kitchen, Biddy Martin, Biddy's actually not here today, Nikki Meeks, Abigail Meredith, Susan Polk Van Dusen, Gary Straccius, and Sheila Tucker. If you'd like to see them, please come at 2:15. Honestly, I hope you'll come for both sessions. So going back. If you are watching and you feel inspired to write your own work, or if you have something in progress and you just want a little help with it, we have a monthly fiction writing club for adults. It's called Ink Arts, and it meets on the second Tuesday of the month here in the library. We're usually in the auditorium, and that's from 6 to 8 p.m. And you can work with me and probably about a dozen other writers. We workshop each other's material, we write to prompts, and we talk about what we're currently working on. We've got at least one author who's just about ready to send his book out. We're very excited for him. In addition to that, I did have a message from a cataloger friend. So a cataloger is someone who takes books and puts them into the computer system of the library so that you can find them. And they put all sorts of tags in the computer system. So for example, if you wanted to find Karen's book, you might look for opera, or you might look for the people she mentioned by name. You might look at race relations, you might look at those decades. And so you want, when your book goes into the library, you want it to have as many tags as possible, as many accurate tags as possible. So if someone comes in and they want to read about the thing that you're writing about, they can easily find your book. Otherwise, it might just be on the shelf and need to be sort of pulled out and brought back to life. So if you want your book to be on the library shelf, if you donate a copy, please tuck in a summary of the book. That helps the cataloger know which tags to put on your particular catalog item file. Does that sort of make sense? Okay, that was a quick one. I think that's it. Oh, I did want to say, we recently had a fantasy story competition for children 18 and under, and we had our 6 winners awarded at Magical Creatures Night a couple weeks ago. But we're also going to let all the participants come at 4:30. We're going to celebrate them, have their stories printed out, let them share with each other. And if you'd like to come and encourage them, that'll be at 4:30 in the auditorium. It'll be very exciting for them to get to meet adult authors. So if you're here at 4:30, I'm sure they would love that. So we're going to move on to our local author panel. Yes, after a quick technical break.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for reminding me. How's everybody feeling? That was a great time. About to reconvene. If you will please come and get settled. Are we live again, Connor? We are live again. All right. I would like to welcome each of our authors up to the stage one at a time, beginning with Jerry Bingham.
Are we? Let's change it up.
Pardon?
You got the wrong list.
Oh, I'm on the wrong list.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have just emotionally destroyed 4 authors. Okay. I am sorry. Janet Wesley.
I'm going home now. Great presentation.
God, why won't she just die? I can't take this anymore. Don't you care whether or not she hurts? Can't you hear her screaming out in pain? God, if you're really not going to heal her, then let her die. Or do you like to see her suffering? Guilty prayers, we all pray them. What causes the conflict in our prayers? Do we become a sinner because we utter these guilty prayers? I'm Dr. Janet Wesley, and my book, Guilty Prayers, deals with emotions that get out of control with people. They are all true stories. It tells about the individual's journeys on what they went through and how they finally broke and sought help and had resolution. My background is that my PhD is in natural health. I have a bachelor's in nursing, master's in healthcare administration, and then, of course, my PhD is in natural health. So I have been in the medical field for 51 years, and I've seen a lot. And it can be quite devastating when we have our emotions that get out of hand. It can cripple us permanently. I write a blog called Mind, Body, Connection, Hypnosis.com. And I write about spirituality, natural health, and all of the topics that you would like to have in your life. For instance, nutrition. And so I'm not going to take up any more time because I know that there are other authors, but my book is here at the library. It deals with the emotions of anger, fear, anxiety. So I invite you to please think about it. It has been translated into Spanish and into Chinese too. So thank you for your time.
All right, and our next author will be Cynthia D'Alba.
Good morning. I grew up in Hot Springs. I grew up in the library. I lived in the library growing up. Cynthia Donathan growing up. I write as Cynthia D'Alba, and I write romance. And after following Janet, the reason why I write romance is because I want to close a book and go, oh my God, that was so good. And I want to make my readers feel happy. And there is a job for every book. What she writes is so important. And what all of you write is so important too, because you're reaching readers. I write romance, just pure. I may be the only romance writer here today, but I thought I'd give y'all just a couple of statistics and I'll tell you why. About 2.2 million books are published every year. And the current in 23, the market value was $132 billion. And they're estimating by 2013, the book sales will be up to $164 billion. Romance accounts for $1.44 billion in sales. Crime and mystery, 728 million. Religious, inspirational, 720 million. Science fiction, 520 million. Horror, 80 million. When I went to school, I also have a degree in nursing, and I have a master's in business administration, and a master's in curriculum and instruction, and a doctorate in higher education administration. And one of the things I looked at when I did this is, if this is going to be a career, I need to make money. I've got to pay my electric bill, and I've got to keep my husband in the lifestyle to which he wishes to become accustomed. So I have to earn some money at this. I ran into a doctoral student, was in class with me, and he was writing literary fiction. And he said, "Why are you writing romance? I mean, why are you doing that?" And I said, "Because I want to make some money at this job." So I write romance, and I've written 30 books. Wow. And I have had a lot of fun. The readers in romance are insanely loyal and are very heavy readers. So I'm Cynthia D'Alba, and come by and see me this afternoon. I'd love to meet you in person, and I have Cadbury eggs as a bribe. So come by, grab an egg, and we can talk. Thank you.
Next up is Darlene Howell.
I don't know if what I feel is excitement or nervousness, so I'm going to go with excitement. You know, in my 50 plus years, I've had many titles assigned to me. A daughter, and a wife, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, a niece, and it seems very odd now that I have author connected to my name. In my 20s, you know, you have your dreams and your bucket list things, and on that was to write children's books. And that started in my 20s. You know, to become an author, first you have to have the desire. And I had the desire, but I never had the time nor the resources. I was busy being a mom, working full time. You know, you have your home, there's laundry, bills to pay, kids to keep up with. So my 20s went by and I still had the desire. Then reached my 30s and still didn't find the time. Into my 40s, same story. And I'm in my mid 50s, and one day I said, if I'm going to do this, I need to get it done. So with that, now we have Willow Dew and the Mushroom Forest. And I'm so proud. This is my first children's book. It was a labor of love to learn because I did not take classes to learn how to become an author. I'm self-published through KDP. And it was just taking the tools at my hands, which would be my computer, and I now say that I've graduated the University of YouTube, because literally it was through authors that so graciously gave of their time, and they would make a video, a tutorial. So I spent hours and hours listening and learning and listening and learning. And I now say, if I can do this, anyone can do this. So thank you. Next is Rose Pogue.
Hey there, it's good to be here today with you all. I semi-retired last year, and kind of like Darlene, I kept putting off writing, and so when I semi-retired, I said it's time to write my first book. So that's what I did. I work in the hospital, and I've been a chaplain there for over 30 years, going on 33 in June. Hey, Trina, good to see you. So as I notice what goes on in people's lives, you can't help but notice, because you see these patients and what they're going through, and even in your own life, things that we sometimes go through. And as a Christian believer, I wanted to make a difference to an audience of people who are struggling with depression, feeling suicidal, maybe are just existing. As a Christian believer, you learn every day can be a day of joy, even in the midst of the storms of life. The storms can get to us sometimes, and sometimes we're just like this. The monitor is beginning to show no life. And fortunately, there's times people are resuscitated and they come back to life and they live longer. Many times they don't. And there are people who are struggling with, what do I do with today? What do I do with my past? Thank God, through many years of just becoming a Christian and talking to people and praying and counsel, you learn that past is meant to be a source of strength and hope. So if I should die before I'm dead, it's about waking up to life, to hope, to admitting that we're all human and we all struggle, and there's days that we go, God, where are you? I'm in a valley and I don't know how to get out. Have you been there before? I have. And we still go through those valleys regardless where we are in relationship with God. So I'm looking forward to writing my second book. And if you would like to see this, I did bring some copies today if you were interested. You can get this book also at Amazon. Thank you for your time.
And Deborah Custer is next. Thank you. It's been really a good morning, hasn't it? Just so many different angles. I just really appreciate all that. I am an illustrator of a children's book called Jake the Deer-Hearted, and I'm very grateful to Carrots Publishing for partnering with me to make it possible. My life career has been in art education and as a textile artist, and my experience as an author was focused on academic research and publications. However, my story about Jake had its beginnings almost 30 years ago. So it only took me 30 years to write one little children's book. Anyway, we were living in East Texas and had taken a stray dog named Jake, had taken him home with us. And one evening, my husband was returning from a walk, and he came back and said, "You are not going to believe this, but there was a small group of deer that saw Jake in the back, saw Jake. They were quite a ways away." And he said, instead of running off, they walked straight up to him until they were like nose to him. And at that time I said, well, he must have been raised by deer. Anyway, I was working on a master's degree. I was an art teacher working on my master's, and one in a one of the courses, I was allowed to write a children's book. That I proposed that, and I was going to do it about Jake being raised by deer, and I did the illustrations in kind of a clunky watercolor medium. And then I put it all in a box, and until about 3 years ago, I found that box. We actually moved here to the Hot Springs area, and you find a lot of things lost under your bed when you move. Anyway, and I had retired at that time, and so I ended up reworking, and never thought that making something short was really harder than making something long. And I had begun working with my illustration. I began working with my weavings and making my artwork that way. And so I created my, instead of watercolor, I created my illustrations with my hand-woven textiles and embroidery. So my book has the illustrations. It was really easy to just scan those for the illustrator. And then so the illustrations are out of the textiles, which took a long time too, but it was really, I usually do larger, so it was just really cool to do this. So I would love for you to see these. I will have all of these illustrations, and I would love for you to see me work in the auditorium, right? Thank you. Next is William Sales.
Give them hell, please.
I now wear socks. For 21 years, I lived in Lahaina, Hawaii, the town that burned down last summer. So I moved from Iowa. I saw pictures of the Grand Canyon and the Eiffel Tower and the Panama Canal. When I was 5 years old, I saw these in kindergarten. I knew there was more out there than Iowa. And then one of the pictures was hula girls and palm trees. Stop. I said to myself at 5 years old, I'm going to live there someday. I asked my parents at dinner one night, did our wagons break down on the way to California? Is that why we're here? Because I couldn't understand why we didn't live out there roller skating instead of shoveling snow like we were all the time. But so I did escape. I lived in Washington State 30 years, had a career in a business, and retired in Hawaii in 2002. Modestly, I mean really modestly. Got divorced over it. My first book, which I thought I had in my box, but it's in the other box, is called Maui on the Rocks. It's about all your dreams coming true and then getting divorced over it. So it wasn't funny at the time, but I've turned it into a comedy since then. So yes, there are people in the world that write romance. Who was it that writes romance novels? Is she gone already? Anyway, it's romance from a men's point of view. The second book was about dating crazy women in Hawaii at 54 years old. And, yeah, that's comedy too. And then the third one is Maui Out of Body, where I started to reflect on my life and the Hubble telescope and Christianity and Buddhism. I belonged to Rotary by then, and our Rotary group met at the Jodo, the Buddhist mission, and I was teaching Tai Chi. But I'll set all that aside. Oh, I also met my wife, who I've been married to now for 18 years. That romance is in this story. So I'll have all those books, and I've donated them all to the library as well. If you don't want to buy them, however, I appreciate it if you do. I wanted to mention that I've been once or twice to your writers group. Very encourage all of you to join her. That's a great outreach for the library. Also, the Hot Springs Village writers group is, there's a member here, Michael Dryhurst. We meet a couple times a month. I can tell you more about that later. There's also a haiku club here that meets first Friday of every month. That's this Friday at 2 o'clock. 2 or 3 people show up. So we'd love to have more haiku writers. The last thing is journal. I've been journaling since 8th grade. And now I have 60 of these at home. So write, if you're a writer, write. Thank you, Shannon.
Next is Ashley Nick Lindsley.
Hello, some of you may have seen me before. It was my first time here last year, and I actually worked in the children's department here for almost 2 years, where Miss Shannon encouraged me to get my stuff up here and get out here. Just a little bit about me. I grew up born and raised in Shreveport. We moved up here about 3 years ago. My parents, we came up here every year on vacation. They always wanted to retire here, so we knew we wanted to get up here. I spent almost 10 years in education, teaching preschool through 2nd grade. I spent 4 years in the preschool kindergarten autism room. I made a hard exit during COVID, and now I'm doing joy stuff. So I did most of my writing in my teens, and now I'm getting around to publishing all that. I got both of these self-published last year. One is a fantasy book, which I'm still kind of narrowing down the target audience for. Everything is very symbolic, and the other one is the first volume of poetry, which is kind of where it all got started. I homeschooled most of the time, but I went into 4th grade in public school. And one of our assignments from my teacher, Miss Maple, was to write, which I learned today was a Diamante poem. I've been trying to pinpoint what kind it was all these years. So I will just read that to you really quickly. It's called Growing and Changing. Toddler, funny, happy, crawling, crying, laughing, playful, growing, busy, responsible, working, cooking, aging, serious, teaching, adult. So this was the first formal writing assignment I ever had. And she was like, you could write one day. So 20-something years later, I'm publishing. I have a short volume of 50 poems that I wrote between the ages of 10 and 17. I wrote almost 500 poems in my teens. So I'm trying to get a whole series. My fantasy book, which I'm working on right now, this is kind of a beta version. I have an illustrator who is working on original comic style illustrations from my sketches and ideas for my book. And I'm going to have my full release ready to go, fully illustrated at SpaCon in September. I'm also pausing a prequel where she's drawing some characters as well. And I'm slowly working on a children's book about our dog called Amber, which I wrote. I'll have to change the ending because she's passed since then. But she's working on bringing my sketches to life. And I'm really excited about these projects. It's slow going, but I'm really finding a lot of joy in it. And I hope I get to meet some of you guys this afternoon. Thank you.
Next is Sharon Keithley.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Sharon Keithley. My background, as many of you who are here today, is in nursing. I've spent many years in the operating room and absolutely loved every minute. About 25 years ago, I decided I needed something more, so I branched out, opened my own medical consulting company, and worked with insurance companies and attorneys managing their medical claims, and have loved every second. So my book was inspired, I guess, from a patient that I had who was injured with a head injury and was expected to recover but didn't for whatever reason. He became depressed, he became a reclusive, he wouldn't interact with people, and his family was like, I don't know what's going on. So my job was to find him the provider that could help him with whatever his problem was, whether that be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a counselor, something to help him deal with this depression that seemed to be setting in with him. Well, actually what happened, I met with the man. He told me that, we talked about it 2 or 3 different times. And one day I said, why is it that you can talk with me, but you can't talk with your mother or you can't talk with anybody else? It makes no sense to me. And he said, Miss Sharon, you don't have colors around you. I was like, what? I I don't know what that means. He said, you don't have colors around you. People I see have colors. They all have colors, and you don't. And I was like, okay, sure. Okay, what psychiatrist do I need to find for this young man? Because something was not right here. Well, come to find out, after many months of diagnosing and EEGs and all kinds of other tests, the head injury left him with a condition called synesthesia. So my detective has synesthesia, and she is able to see what you are thinking in the form of colors and energy and just the ability to see from your emotions what you are feeling, whether you're lying, whether you're hiding something, whether you are, being deceitful in any way, or whether you're being honest. And so it's her mission to be able to interpret your feelings. And I have had so much fun writing this book. This is the first in a series of 5. I have one more coming out in August. You guys are the first to know that it's due in August. So I'm really, really excited to be able to introduce Olivia and all the wonderful things that she will bring to your hours of entertainment. Thank you, guys.
Next is Stephen Campbell.
I grab my book. I just walked in.
I'm going to stall for just a moment. So thank you, Mr. Sales, for mentioning e-cards. I also have 2 other fiction writing clubs, one for teenagers, which is pretty well attended, and we have a lot of fun. That's Fiction Writers Cafe, usually the first Monday of the month. Almost done stalling. And Scribes Fiction Writers, which is for 10 to 12-year-olds, usually the third Monday of the month. And welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me be late today. Hey guys, I was here last year too, and I'm glad to be back this year. This is Shining Star. I've read this book at Wednesday Night Poetry with Kai Coggin several times. I wrote it over the last 5 years, and it basically is just about fitting in. I had a local person illustrate it for me, Danny Ward, and it's just the uniqueness of this book is that Star is the shape of a star. Like she's wants to be friends with the squares, and Circle is her best friend. So it's just really all about fitting in, about how you feel like you are not fitting in at a certain age when you're 8, 9, 10, 12. It's probably for that age range of children. But basically, it could be about me as a child. I thought I wanted to be different. I always wanted to be somebody else. And even as an adult, I feel like I wish I was somebody else all the time. But as I got older, I'm learning that's not true. And I wrote a book about it to help people because I never had anybody tell me that when I was a little. Nobody said you're good enough. Yeah, sure. Kai's in the back. Everybody, I'm so happy to see you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks a lot.
Next is Jenny Carlisle.
Hi, I'm Jenny Carlisle, and I was here at your Christmas meeting. We had a good time that day. I first wanted to start off with a quote from Ernest Hemingway, and this is very loosely quoted. I can't find his exact words, but it's the way I have heard it. If someone says they want to be a writer and they're not writing, they don't, which is just true. I mean, if you want to be a writer, you need to keep writing. And what you can do to do that is to do a journal, or even when you're on Facebook, don't just hit a smile emoji, write something. You just need to keep your thoughts out there, keep your thoughts going. It's also a very good mental health exercise because in my experience, the stories that were running around in my head, the characters that were talking to me had to come out or something was going to be dangerous. So, that's the key to this is that you need to always keep writing. If you find that you can specialize in fiction or in any kind of writing, if you're an academic and you have research like the speaker we had earlier, and you're specializing in something, that's wonderful. That will help you if you do want to get published, if you can narrow it down a little bit. If your goal is to have someone else read it, never stop learning. Always learn about the industry, always learn about what's happening, and always go to conferences, enter contests, just, keep active in doing this. I write Christian fiction because I felt like that was my specialty. It's the kind of books that I love to read. It also helped me feel like I was making a small contribution to maybe teaching someone about Jesus in my own small way. So if you find that that is your focus, the company that I write with, that I'm published by, is called Scrivenings Press. They're located in Morrilton, actually. The owner lives in Morrilton, Arkansas, but her reach is nationwide. She has like 60 writers or more who have been published. And it's a good community of writers, besides just getting your name out there. All of our books are available on Amazon. I have a series of 3 Christian fiction novels, and then a 4th, which is a novella, a small one. And so those have all been published. I have also published 2 nonfiction when I worked with Ouachita Life writing columns. I collected all of those into a book. The big thing I want to tell you about is in November of next year, there's going to be a conference called ScrivCon, to take off on the Comic Con type of thing. SCRIVCON, scrivcon.com is the website. The conference is going to be at the Hotel Hot Springs, the convention center, in November, the 6th through the 8th of November. So if you're interested in Christian fiction, learning about it, writing it, look up that conference and register for it, and we'd love to see you there in November. And I'll be here about this afternoon, the 2nd session, to talk to you. Thanks.
Next is Jay Southern Hicks.
I was going to time myself, but that was my alarm that went off and I couldn't shut it off. So Shannon's going to have to drive me off. My middle name is Southern. It's spelled with a U. And our keynote speaker reminded me that my very first professionally published work was in a scholarly journal called Popular Music and Society. Not quite opera, but it was on an article called Television Theme Songs, a Content Analysis. Watched a lot of TV growing up, and the old-fashioned sitcoms always have music. Since then, I've written 2 albums, music albums, and a couple of songs that were placed in movies that have had over 1 million streams. I never knew I would become a songwriter, but I always liked writing, and I think writing traverses different mediums. It's a joy. I spent the last 30 years in Los Angeles, although I'm born and raised in Arkansas. I always knew I would come back. It's phenomenal to be back. I look out these windows and I see nothing but beauty surrounding us. In California, it's great, but you got to work at the beauty. You got to go somewhere. You got to travel here. You walk out your front door and you're in nature. So happy to be back. I started out playwriting, written a couple of plays that were produced in Los Angeles, and they're published as well. My love now is Christian fantasy, and I am self-published with these books because it combines different genres. I think a publisher would have probably made me change it. I include apologetics in these, and where it's fantasy, but I include a third real time. So there's a third of the books are real-time interaction with real people, and the rest is fantasy. I believe that if you're writing, it's like acting. One of the best acting teachers who taught Barbara Streisand taught me, if you don't bring to stage what is happening to you, no one's going to care. And the same thing with writing. We write what we know. And even in Christian fantasy, it's characters that are evolved out of who I know. It's stories. These are all set in Garland County, Arkansas. It's based on what I know in nature, and it's taking a creative position on it. You know, God is the greatest creator of all, the most creative entity we know, and we're created in his image. And so I think he takes joy in our creative look on his creation. But thanks, y'all. Thanks, y'all.
Next is Abigail Meredith. Are you here today, Abby? I haven't seen you yet. All right, one moment. Michael Dryhurst.
I'm running all the way.
That's okay.
The big question is, can I mount Everest? I'm probably the first foreign speaker coming from a little island off the northwest coast of Europe. I knew I'd get a laugh. I spent 50 years in the movie industry, which is what brought me to the promised land. Work was drying up in London. I didn't want to be one of 20 producers waiting for the next movie to land from Hollywood. So Mohammed went to the mountain, Hollywood. So I've lived in this country for 40 years. Despite that amount of time, I'm still learning American. And then when my wife and I moved here from California, I have to learn Arkansas. It's not easy, believe me. I'd rather learn Zulu, but there you go. Anyway, I was born into a movie industry family. My father was the first independent producer in the UK. I've been married a number of times. They've all been in the movie industry. And one day, my father spoke to me. On reflection, he very rarely spoke to me. But on this occasion, he said to me, if you ever think of writing, write about something you know. Well, the only thing I know about two things. One is the movie industry. The other is buses, but that's a long story, which I won't bore you with. My book is called Check the Gate, and I write about interweaving fiction with faction. I write fiction mixed with fact. So that in my book, there is a number of characters who are real. I mention my movie-making partner, John Morman, who you may know as the director of Point Blank, Deliverance, Excalibur. I did 5 movies with John. And the other words of wisdom, my father said, as I said earlier, if you're going to write about something you know. The current book in which I'm working is also interweaving. I'm 86 years old, and my wife had the addendum going on 12. Nevertheless, I'm trying to finish a book before I shuffle off this mortal coil, and I'm aided by the fact that I was brought up in the Blitz on London during World War II. And of course, none of you Americans know what it's like to be brought up with living with bombs dropping. Why we're not supporting Ukraine, God only knows. Thank you. Oh, let me just tell you, the book is called Check the Gate. You may say, at the end of each printed take, the director will turn to the continuity girl and say, print takes 2 and 3. Whereupon the first assistant director would turn to the first camera assistant and say, check the gate. The gate is a part behind the lens on a camera through which the film travels. As the film travels, it picks up static from the felt line magazines which store the film. If there's a slight hair in the gate, when you think it's going to be projected through 250 to 300 feet, it'll show up like a sequoia. So you have to check the gate whenever the director says print. Thank you very much.
Next is Dustin Campbell.
Thank you, Vivian.
Good morning, and you're going to know me as the creepy guy. I write ghost stories for kids and young adults, and some of you are asking what is wrong with him. And so If you will indulge me, I'm going to read a small excerpt from a book that I published back in 2021 that I'm very proud of because it took me 5 years to write it. It's called The Legend of the Cove Witch, and it's about a witch that haunts Magnet Cove where I was raised. I'll be fine. I tried to sound reassuring, but deep down I was scared. As this little girl, she seemed so innocent. I made it to the log and she motioned for me to join her. Slowly I stepped onto the slick wooden surface, trying to keep my balance. I could see the scars and bruises much more clearly as I edged closer to her. No child should have to endure the suffering Jeanette McLean put her through. Are you Mary Ann? I asked her. She smiled at me and she said, I am. Who are you? I'm Noella McLean. I'm a distant relative of yours. Will you play with me? She asked me. Sure. What do you want to play? I asked back. Let's play Escape the Cove Witch. I'll put on my hood and start counting and you run and hide. Okay. I'll go hide while you count. I turned and looked at my friends who looked worried and tried reassuring them that I was okay. I found a spot behind the brush and ducked down, concealing myself while the little girl was still counting. 3, 2, 1. I'm Jeanette McLean and I'm coming to get you, she announced. And for a minute she looked, checking the log again and then the embankment, and then she came close to me, checking the shrubs and peering behind the oak trees. Hello, Mary Ann. You thought you could evade me. I turned and looked and I saw Jeanette McLean, the Cove Witch, standing next to me, and she rushed towards Mary Ann, who screamed for her life. Help me. Please help me. Jeanette grabbed her quickly and dragged her down into the creek waters and started to drown her. I heard her cries and the slappings of the waters as she tried to escape. I went after Mary Ann and Nicholas, my boyfriend, grabbed me by the arm and pulled me away. Noella, stop. There's nothing there. I turned and looked, and he was right. The waters were calm and still. Mary Ann and Jeanette were not in the waters, but I did see something else floating, shaped like a stick man. I knew what it was. My Aunt Nettie had shown it to me earlier. I knelt down and picked it up. It was a stick man tied with Mary Ann's hair and a piece of her cape. I threw it back into the waters and watched as it started to slowly float away down into the deep, dark waters. And I also have 2 kids' books with me as well. They're part of a series. I call it Frightmares. They are like the Goosebumps. And the covers are done by local artist Chris Meeks, if any of you know who he is. He does my covers. And I have a 4th book coming out. I plan to have it published by June, titled The Boogeyman Exists. Thanks.
Jerry Bingham.
Yeah, and let me thank Dustin because with everybody I've listened to here, everybody is writing about such uplifting stuff, and I'm like an anomaly here. I write crime fiction, and it's not writing what I know. I'm not actually a criminal, but I do a lot of research and everything. I research almost every sentence, so I'm covered that way. A little bit about myself and why I write the way I do. I started out as a child. This is an old comedy bit by Bill Cosby. I started out as a child. Well, I was around 10 years old, 12 years old, and I used to keep my mom company at night. And she would come in and get me. She would come in and wake me up, and shake me awake, and she would say, Sherlock is on. And she'd take me out to the living room with her, and I would sit and watch Sherlock Holmes on the Late Late Show. And that became a thing with us. And we've shared Sherlock Holmes throughout her life. And the new series came on and she would share that with me. And so we had that going. When I was probably in junior high, she came in and laid her large volume collection of Sherlock Holmes on the bed. And she said, you have to read this. And it was a bit daunting at first. When I got through maybe a third of it, and then as I was starting in high school, she laid another book on my bed, Bram Stoker's Dracula. And she stood in the doorway and explained chapters of that book and recited, to her recollection, some of the things that kept her awake at night that she had read in that book. And so I started this dark stuff at an early age. And when I was in high school, she bought me a subscription to the Mystery Book Club. And I was heavily seduced by the dark side, I guess. And this is not my life. This is what I do. I spent most of my life, I started out drawing comic books. I did Batman and Spider-Man, and then I fled the East and went to California to work in film. And thank you for the John Borman reference. Anybody who knew John Borman, you got me.
I do.
Yes, and point blank, that pretty much touches on my genre. But so when I decided I moved out here, I've been writing all my life and little publishing, comic books, graphic novels. I published a couple of short stories, and come out here and I gave up my art career pretty much because when I changed locations, I now live in the woods on a lake in a beautiful house, and I said I have to change what I do. I have to finally focus my life on what I love, my writing. And my character, Detective Nicholas Bigel, he is a Sherlock Holmes analogy. And he has a sidekick, Alia, who helps him out. She's his Watson. And the book is Hades' Kiss. And I have so much of a life I have to talk about, but I can't do it in 3 minutes.
Sherry Butler.
Small minds talk about themselves. Average minds talk about other people. Great minds talk about ideas. I was disappointed that our program today made me talk about myself. But since we have this amount of time, I wrote about myself on my author's copy, and you can read that later. So I'm not going to talk about myself other than to say my writing has mostly not been books. I have written magazine articles and periodicals, feature articles for magazines and 6 slipcover publications. I write mostly about birds. I have over 100 articles I published about the outdoors and about travel. So much about myself. Average minds talk about people. The book I have written that I wanted to talk about is this: the ORF Power Breakfast and Literary Society of Hot Springs, Arkansas. These are the people that read the things that you write. This is a compilation of mini memoirs of 12 men. It's the 12 men are called ORF because they call themselves the old retired farts. And the old retired farts' lives are told here, and I tell about them and their contributions. They're not as famous as the 12 apostles. They're not as notorious as the Dirty Dozen, but they made an interesting contribution to the city of Hot Springs. I hope people can read about it. Great minds talk about ideas. And the other book that I have written that Amazon promised me would be here today that I don't have is this book, Mothers, Memories, and Birds. It was published as an ebook about 2 years ago. It's the story of 5 remarkable, heroic women. Mothers is a great idea, and motherhood is even a greater idea. Biographies about women are shamefully negligent in our society. I looked at a list of the most notable biographies that have ever been written, it had 3 women. Plutarch's Lives had 100 of the ancients, only 2 of them were women. This tells the story of 5 ordinary, heroic women who traveled the Trail of Tears, who went through World War II, who went through the Great Depression, who went through the Civil Rights Movement, and who went through the making of the atomic bomb. I would love to talk to you about it this afternoon.
Layla Gatlin. Hello, I'm Layla Gatlin. I am a Christian author. I write fiction and nonfiction, I have a variety of subgenres. So I do have one crime fiction actually, and I have that one's called Judas Killer, and I have a fantasy fiction that's a young adult. It's called Revelation, and I started writing when I was 12. And I wrote that one in high school, and it was my baby, so I spent the longest time writing it, and it took me the longest to get it out there. And so that one's my merchandise today, my shirt and my little book necklace my friend made me. Yeah, that's all for that one. But I wanted to talk to you guys about my upcoming book, actually. I have one coming out hopefully by the end of this year. I'm hoping to get it out by the fall. We'll see. But it's called Convergence, and it is a post-apocalyptic, kind of dystopian fiction. So it will be young adult as well. And I'm going to read just a little bit of a thing to kind of give you a interest in it, I guess. Okay, so what if tonight a cataclysmic event destroyed the world as you know it? But having had access to privileged information, your family, as well as a group of about 100 or so, are sheltered from the calamity. Imagine you emerge 5 years later, changed, and believing yourselves to be the only survivors. But then you discover you aren't. And these others that you find have decided that they hate you for what you did or didn't do in the past. Can old relationships and even older morals be revived in a post-apocalyptic society that is founded on distrust and discrimination? Will love or hate win in the end? Look for it on. Next is Katrina Robertson.
I sat in the conference room and I had hot tears spilling down my face when my attorney looked me in the eyes and he said, "Katrina, you're looking at the possibility of a year in jail." The air left the room in that moment as if in a vacuum, and I found it hard to breathe. Anything he said after that moment was not discernible. Lemons. I've been handed a lot of them in my life, but one thing I've become good at is turning those lemons into some lemonade. I've adopted 3 boys, all of them from horrific, traumatic childhoods. One of them is also severely intellectually disabled. I moved heaven and earth to try to give him a normal life within the community and a family, and all of that ended in a nightmarish way of us having to relinquish him to a facility. Guilt-ridden and facing judgment from many, I again sat in a conference room with tears spilling down my face as a social worker looked at me and said, "Noah is so lucky to have you." Me? Why? If I were that great for him, why must he be here? 3 months later, I sat in the back of an auditorium at a talent show the residents of that facility were putting on. I watched as my son cheered and gave standing ovations to his peers. He danced in the aisle, and then he got up to sing his part, which was, "How Great is Our God." There's my lemonade. again, with tears streaming down my face. I've got 2 biological children. One, my daughter, had complex issues as a child that I can't go into here for time, but they were significant enough that I had concerns about her future. My book that I wrote starts the day of her wedding on April 9th, 2022, as I watched the pickup drive off with her and her new husband sitting in the back of the pickup. Again, the tears came, but my lemonade was sweet. My biological son is on the autism spectrum. Things are difficult for him. It's been 20 years of hard with him. But last week, he started his first real full-time job, and I have a feeling I'll soon be able to drink that lemonade as he starts off life independently. And yes, there'll probably be tears involved. But what was I talking about at the beginning? I kind of left you hanging. Well, unfortunately, I can't cover it in 3 minutes, but I do in my book. But there was some really sweet lemonade that I'm still drinking. The story of that lemon to lemonade experience, along with many of the others, it's a memoir written in a diary format called Juror Number 11, a memoir of the broken justice system and rising from the trials of life.
Next is Ms. Cheryl Bass.
Good afternoon. My love is for history and hot springs. I'm a local historian and I'm passionate about those 2 things. I'm also passionate about a mystery man that I actually fell in love with about in 2014. And since that time, I've been learning to love him and what he represents more and more. John Lee Webb, as I have observed him in everyday walks of life, and whose friendship I have always esteemed as a rare privilege, impresses me as a man more appreciative of the position of responsibility in which his people have placed him than he is proud to realize that anyone with creative skill can possess an abundance of the world's goods. But it takes a man extraordinary to be selected for the confidences and high esteem as one of the leaders of his people. His greatest desire seems to be working out of the betterment of the colored people. It does not seem to be his aim to lift the colored people by exciting them against other races, but more does he seem to try to raise higher the ideals of his people and to teach them the value and dignity of his life and its work. The entire Southland, and particularly Hot Springs, is proud to have a man of John L. Webb's type and fineness of character as a leader of his people among them. Hot Springs is a very marked degree, shows the benefit of John Lee Webb's residence in the city. Like the great man that he is, growing and bettering his mind and soul, so does he influence his physical surroundings. In conclusion, as a citizen of Hot Springs, I consider it a very rare privilege to add my few humble words to the volume of testimony which may be written around such a good man as John Lee Webb. Yours very truly, C.J. Horner. You all recognize the name of C.J. Horner, and hopefully you will recognize before it's over with, as I've learned from those of you here today, how to become a more public voice about the mystery man that I fell in love with, John Lee Webb, born in 1877 and died in 1947, who built most of what we see on the east side of Hot Springs behind the convention center. You walk past the building once known as the Woodman, the National Baptist Hotel, and now Home Harbor. We are in a stream restoration point of his house, over $500,000 at this point, but in grants. And it's been a labor of love, but his reputation did not stop in Hot Springs. It covered the entire United States as we know it, also into Haiti. This is a good book, ladies and gentlemen. It's a mystery book. How could he have done such a thing? Build a building at $500,000 in 1923. And when you look at that figure today, it would come to $9,132,514.62. Read about my mystery lover. I'll see you this afternoon.
Next is Mike Blythe.
Good morning.
Morning.
You know, I look at all these authors, great books, a lot of research. I'm just impressed. All I put together was a picture book. In and now, Hot Springs, Arkansas.
I've read it.
You got one? Great. I'll sign it if it's here.
I have written an article about Hot Springs intercity transit, being a bus fanatic since the age of 3 days, and I'm now 86. I give at the end of my article a bibliography, your mention.
Thank you.
Then
A little history on how this came about. Our daughter went to New York with her new husband and her in-laws. They did the usual New York things. They toured, went to the Empire State Building, probably went to a Broadway show, did some Christmas shopping, and when she came back, she brought me a book, but that title was Then and Now, New York City. It was photographs made in the 1890s compared with current photographs. I was fascinated. I'm a volunteer at the Historical Society. Clyde Covington was our president. Well, I showed that to him, and Clyde said, my Hot Springs would be a great for a then and now book. Well, the seed was planted. I would find old photographs at the Historical Society. I would put them on the copy machine, make copies. Then I would go out and try to find exactly where that photographer stood. I got to go to the top of some of the tallest buildings in Hot Springs. I went, at the time the Majestic was still there. I was in the Majestic, the Arlington, the Burton Building, the Dugan Sturt Building. I even got to stand in the middle of streets. Now, imagine this. An 80-year-old man in the middle of Central Avenue taking a picture to south, and the light changes. I'm standing on the yellow line just like this. Up on the sidewalk, a man said, look at that old fool out in the middle of the street. The other guy said, someone get a net? Anyway, I had a lot of fun putting this book together. It was published by all the work as far as publishing it was done by the Historical Society. The Historical Society benefits, I don't get a dime from it, have never got a dime from it. If you buy one, the profits go to the Garland County Historical Society.
Next is Jane Elsie.
Good morning, everybody. You know, it's great to hear that it takes a village to stop a library because we all are doing something so very different. It's really kind of fun to see. I am from Eureka Springs, Arkansas. I'm a native Floridian, and I moved to Arkansas 30 some odd years ago, came here for vacation and never went home. And whoever was talking about how beautiful Arkansas is, yes, it's just a wonderful state to live in. I write cozy murder mysteries, and the husband always dies. It's my tagline, it's my marketing material. Everybody laughs, the guys get a little tight, you know. If you're a good husband, you're safe. If you're not a good husband, you're probably on the VIP list. I have a little club that the books focus on 4 women my age who play games, and the husband always dies. And I have a little VIP club that sort of helped me support myself or give me encouragement when I first started. And you can nominate a person to be bumped off in one of my books. It's called the VIP Killer Club. And, you know, no one's going to recognize them but me in the Killer Club. But it's just a whole lot of fun seeing why would someone kill somebody. So this is book one, published in 2020. It's Hot Springs. It started in, you know, the crime is in Hot Springs. The murder takes place in the Bennington Hotel. I don't know where that is. And I just had a great time taking your wonderful history and twisting the hell out of it. I am a journalist by trade, and so I'm really having a good time making stuff up. And my 4 girls, they take a bucket list trip every other year. So this is the Galapagos Islands. Book 3, which takes place in the wine country of Arkansas. And the book that just came out last weekend is called Killer Croquet on the Emerald Isle. And we went to Ireland, and another husband bites the dust. So, you know, it's really fun to make stuff up, is really what it is. To take, you know, something fictional and then just work the hell out of it. And so that's kind of what I've done, and just sort of giving us a place to escape. They're getting great reviews. They're for sale on Amazon, of course, but also through the other avenues. I'll see you this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
She just blew past that, but she just said she released a book last weekend.
Yes,
Let's give her a round of applause. Next is Shirley Chancellor.
Hello, I'm just so thrilled that we have so many local authors. It's exciting for me. I am a retired educator, pastor, author, and chief editor for Paper Crown Media. We help people publish their books, self-publish or publish. My book is Deactivating Triggers, Finding Joy and Peace in the Middle of a Chaotic, Angry World. It's meant to be a book that you keep on your shelf and refer to and help other people overcome believing those lies as they grow up, that they're not worthy, they're not able to accomplish much, they're never going to amount to anything, which is the way I grew up and was told as I grew up. But the Lord led me through so many different, and taught me so many different strategies, and gave me so many tools for my tool belt to overcome those things. And I'm so excited to have a former student in the audience. I'm so proud of her. She's been an amazing author since 6th grade. But our ministry is helping people overcome and have a life that they never dreamed they could have. And that's why I wrote this book, and the Lord helped me publish it. And I'm a member of 4 around the United States, and one of our team is from England. And we help people who don't even know how to begin putting pen to paper. We take them from there and mentor them and come alongside them, take them all the way through the process, teach them what to expect, because all 4 of us had such really bad experiences when we were writing our books and ended up spending thousands of dollars before we learned that you didn't have to. So I'm getting, as a pastor, getting as much joy out of this side ministry with these ladies, helping people accomplish their dreams and publish the message that the Lord has put on their heart. So this is a wonderful book for church studies together. Each chapter has a set of tools and strategies to practice and use until you come back together for the next meeting. So that's what I'm hoping, that we can help a lot of people overcome the demons of their past and have a truly beautiful life and a relationship with their family. I have a relationship with my family children and grandchildren that I never dreamed I would have because I didn't have that growing up. Anyway, we'll see you this afternoon.
Next is Susan Polk Van Dusen.
Hi, I'm Susan. I grew up in Hot Springs and I graduated from Hot Springs High. And actually, my after-school job when I was in high school was working as a page at the Garland County Library. So this is kind of a full circle moment for me, talking about my own book here. My parents obviously also lived in Hot Springs. My dad was an artist, and when my parents died, I inherited several hundred paintings and drawings that he had done during his lifetime. And I've struggled with what to do with those because there's so many, and I don't want them just to sit in a closet. So I decided that I would use some of his paintings to create a children's book. I'd always wanted to publish a children's book, and that seemed like the perfect use of his art and a way to honor his talent as well. So I chose trees as the theme for the book. That's what's so special about a tree. Because he had several paintings specifically of trees or that included trees, whimsical trees, as you can see on the back, and realistic trees as well. And it was also a topic that any young child could relate to. This book is aimed at children 4 to 8. I chose 14 pieces of art and wrote a rhyming verse that ties them all together. It's designed to inspire appreciation of the value and beauty of trees in young kids. It's good for beginning readers, or the perfect little gentle bedtime story, or to use in a classroom, in a nature unit or poetry unit. It also gives kids a chance to see and appreciate original art. I'll have some of the original paintings actually with me this afternoon, so you can see how they looked in person. So anyway, I'll show you a few. I have a couple more seconds. They're all different styles. This was done in 1970 when I was a baby, and so you can see there's a lot of different styles in here. But I also have a second book, which is almost finished and will come out around Thanksgiving. It's a totally different book. I used an illustrator for that. But happy to be here. Thanks.
Kaya Kitchen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Akaya Kitchen, born and raised right here in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Now I live in Little Rock. I am an ordained Assemblies of God evangelist, a professor of communication, working on a doctorate in Messianic Jewish Studies, and founder and president of a nonprofit Lifting Up Zion. And because I'm not busy enough this month, I self-published my first children's book, God's Word is Like, Word Pictures That Bring the Bible to Life. It's a book of word pictures that help kids really understand how the Word of God is relevant to them in so many ways. And a bonus page is an activity book with maps and other activities where they can really engage with the principles. So I just want to read about 3 or 4 of these word pictures with you today. God's Word is like a light. It helps me see where I should go. Your Word is a lamp to my feet and a light for my path. God's Word is like a hiding place. It keeps me safe from trouble. You are my hiding place and my shield. I hope in your Word. God's Word is like a map. It shows me the way I should go. Guide me in your truth and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. I wait for you all day long. And I'll do the last one because it's my absolute favorite. The illustration is a nod to second grade me, Park Primary, right here in Hot Springs. It says, God's Word is greater than all things. It will last forever. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. I look forward to seeing you and meeting you this afternoon.
Next is Gary Straction.
I gotta tell you how privileged I feel to be in the same room with all you guys. I don't know what I'm doing here. In the mid-40s, 1940s, my parents, Marjorie and Alfred Straccius, spent their honeymoon in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and vowed to always come back one day and retire here and live out the rest of their lives here. Well, when it came within a year of my dad's retirement, I told him I'd come down, locate a little business for him, for something to do, keep him busy. And I did. I found a little mobile home park on Lake Hamilton, beautiful little place. But shortly after we purchased it, my dad lost his job. He was downsized, so he wasn't vested. He had to get another job and get his retirement going. I said I'd come down here for a year. Before we bought it, I told him I'd work it for him, and I did for a full year. The retirement ended. He had to keep working. I ended up 10 years working the trailer park in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and loved every bit of it. I had just graduated with a degree in recreation administration. Decided I didn't want to mess with the politics and being inside all day long. So this job fit. For 35 years, people would ask me about my day, and I'd tell them I had a great day or a crazy day or an absolutely nutty day. And they said, you should be writing that stuff down. For 35 years, I didn't. For the next 10 years, I started writing it down. I started putting it in notes. I had notes about this high, and it ended up being a book. My book is Somebody's Gonna Lose a Trailer. The joke goes, what do an Arkansas divorce, tornado, and meth lab have in common? Somebody's gonna lose a trailer. Anyway, my book is published through Page Publishing. I had a good time with them. We're doing well on sales, I think, I hope. My illustrator was Gary Simmons, wonderful artist in Hot Springs. I told him, read the book and then just draw a picture from each chapter of a story that you remember. He nailed it. He made the book. Love for you to come up, take a look this afternoon, have a good talk, and buy some books.
And next is Kai Coggin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kai Coggin. I am a poet, an author, and a teaching artist here in Hot Springs. I've lived here for about 12 years with my wife. And I'm also the host of the longest running consecutive weekly open mic series in the entire country, Wednesday Night Poetry, which happens right here in Hot Springs. Clap it up. It's a big deal. It started February 1st, 1989 by a man named Bud Kenny, and we've actually never, ever missed a single week. This week, today, we're celebrating week number 1,840 weeks in a row. That's a really, really big deal. So for all of you authors out there, if you want to come and share a little bit of your book or read your short story, just like Lucky did or Miss Cheryl did, Wednesday Night Poetry is open to you. It's at 6:30 at Collective Coffee and Tea every single Wednesday, forever. So that's my commercial for that. I want to thank the Hot Springs Area Cultural Alliance for this community partnered event. Wednesday Night Poetry is also a community partnered event. This is part of Arts on the Park, the amazing festival that's going on that has local author day every year. So it's really cool. Our community does a lot of things for artists and for the arts and especially the literary community. So thank you to Shannon and everyone with the Garland County Library. I have 5 books that are out that have been published by different publishers. And actually my latest collection, Mother of Other Kingdoms, just came out on Monday, last Monday on Earth Day, April 22nd. And this collection is a tender turn for myself. The last 3 books that I've put out have been about survival, really, have been about writing for my life, writing for my right to love my wife, writing as a brown queer woman here in Arkansas, and just writing so that I can have a place among you. And my advocacy kind of gives rights to other people to express themselves as well. And the thing that I think is so beautiful about libraries is that libraries are for everyone. And it's so important. Representation really, really matters for, a young brown queer kid like me, for example, to find stories about myself also in the library. So I'm wearing my Libraries Are For Everyone t-shirt. I'm going to share a poem from my new book. I became a master naturalist a couple of years ago, and so this book really zooms into the natural world. I've always wanted to be a mother, but I don't have any human children, so I mother the more than human kingdoms, the bugs and the birds and the trees and the animals. This is called Tender and Ache, for Apis mellifera. Tender and ache. I am an exposed bloom, a dandelion head with almost every wish blown away, still standing in an empty field with hope of fruiting a dream. Can you see why I mother every possible thing? Why the world becomes my womb and my hands a desperate sanctuary? I rescued a bumblebee from between the window pane and plastic sheeting of the greenhouse, a big bear of a bee, fuzzy and stunned on the brink of untimely death. Who knows how long he waited for rescue? I cupped his slow body in my hand and walked out to the lilac tree laden with blooms and laid him inside a cluster of heavy-scented petals. If you die, at least die happy in here, little friend, I said to him. And his weakened bee arms clutched around the soft white flowers as though he was hugging them so tightly. Then stillness. I checked on him every hour while I gardened, and in a few hours he buzzed by me on my way to the lilac. I'm alive! A heavy song of thanks, a flight line of gratitude. This is how I mother. I rock the smallest species to sleep, lullaby our deepest human apologies into their innocent ears. That same day, 5 million honeybees being shipped to Alaska to pollinate orchards on ice shelves were rerouted by Delta Airlines. They waited on a hot tarmac in Atlanta for hours. Hotlanta, record-breaking heat, the meteorologist joked on the Weather Channel. The bees died in droves, lifeless yellow-black piles, bodies by the crateful, 800 pounds of dead honeybees, an oversight, lost in the machinery of luggage and transit, moved and left to swelter and starve. 5 million bees, and no lilacs to save them, no open hands, no sweet-petaled embrace, no song of forgiveness whispered into their golden honeyed hives, just the tragic end of 5 million precious pollinating lives. Tender and ache, my mother nature heart breaks into 5 million pieces. I stand in a field and buzz with morning. That's from Mother of Other Kingdoms. I'll be at the meet and greet. Thank you so much, everybody. Keep on writing.
All right, do we have any authors present who did not get to speak? All right, then we'll close this session and reconvene at 1 o'clock in the auditorium. If you are in group A, please come by at 12:45 and I will let you in so you can set up your tables. And if you're joining us virtually, please come down and meet these authors in person. I'm sure they'd love to talk to you. Thank you.